How can V beat Atom Smasher at the end of Cyberpunk, considering that he was half dying, and that both the Edgerunner series and various parts of the game teach us that Atom Smasher was an unstoppable machine? The answer is easy. V is even more unstoppable. And of course, the protagonist. But I think this goes beyond that. In this video, I'm going to try to explain to you in more depth and with evidence why I think V was much stronger than we thought, giving him extra chances when facing Smasher. I quickly remind you that you can subscribe and leave a like to support me. Let's move on to the video. We start by understanding Atom Smasher himself and why he is a really difficult opponent to beat. First, Smasher is more machine than man, with his entire body and limbs replaced by cybernetic parts, weapons, and advantages against his enemies. He is, in short, a killing machine. He is recognized as someone who kills his enemies in a brutal and sadistic way, and that same violence that he wielded helped elevate his reputation. However, in one of his jobs, he received several missiles, which ended up causing his body and face to be torn to pieces. His co-workers took Smasher's parts and put them to safety. Later, a corpo would restore part of his consciousness, putting his brain in a jar and offering him a deal, where he would get a robotic body and implants in exchange for his services. The rest is history, and as we can see in both Edgerunners and Cyberpunk, Smasher managed to make a name for himself within the city, carrying out jobs of all kinds. The interesting thing I find in all this is his tolerance for implants and cybernetic parts, since in the series and the game, we were able to see how all these changes come with a cost. Cyberpsychosis. The fact is that when you start installing these implants in excess, it can cause a descent into madness, thus losing all traces of humanity and your own judgment. But in Smasher's case, things are different. He seems to have a real resistance to these problems. His mind is cold and calculating, and he certainly has control of his actions. And the most terrifying part is that he is completely sadistic, as we have seen several times in history, where he has no problem staining his hands with blood in order to carry out his orders, and above all, enjoying it. After knowing a little about Smasher and his story, the question arises, so how could V even stand up to him, much less end his life? V is a mercenary. At the beginning of the game, he lived with Jackie and Mama Wells, doing some jobs and slowly gaining a reputation within Night City. Later and after a few months, V would buy a car and a new apartment within Night City. After completing one of the assignments, V and Jackie would be contacted by Dexter Deshawn with a job much bigger than they had ever thought. Dexter Deshawn was a well-known fixer in Night City, and the proposal he offered them was one of great magnitude. Evidently, V and Jackie agreed, thinking the plan was pretty safe and solid. However, things went very wrong. I don't want to go into too many details, but this is how the story of the V that we know begins. A mercenary who little by little gained a reputation, and where he would later get involved with large corporations thanks to the chip that he was commissioned to steal, and which to preserve had to connect it. Later trying to find a solution to his new problem, the relic chip, which was slowly killing him. So now, to answer the initial question, we must consider several points. First, now V has much more experience than at the beginning of the game. At that time, when he was looking for a solution for his problem with the chip, he had to face many challenges and formidable opponents, which undoubtedly gives V a few extra points, and a lot of experience in combat, hacking, and other skills. But that's not enough. It's not even close to that. V, in addition to having combat and hacking skills, has several implants which he acquires throughout history. Implants which give you advantages in several aspects, both in his vision, attacks, speed, jump, and a few others. All of this begins to give him more possibilities when it comes to facing Smasher. The implants end up being essential to defeating Arasaka's various enemies and soldiers, where the cannons, mantis claws, and others stand out. This allows V to rise to great challenges. However, he falls short when compared to Smasher's implants. I want to clarify that V actually seems to have an extra capacity to carry many implants without giving in to cyberpsychosis. If we base ourselves on the Cyberpunk anime, I think that V, having the number of implants he has at the end of the story, should have already shown certain signs of cyberpsychosis, which he did not do, and which shows that he does have more tolerance to the implants than usual. That's why I think V is not far behind when it comes to arsenal and implants, but also not equal to Smasher. To think that V, just because he is the protagonist, has everything figured out to beat Smasher in the final battle is a bit lazy. I think there is another way to analyze this final confrontation. In this final fight, Smasher doesn't seem to give his all, or at least that's my impression. With all of his implants, I think he could put up a lot more fight than he does. So how would we explain this logically? Well, I think Smasher was too confident when facing V, assuming that he would win the fight. And when he realized it, it was too late and V had already inflicted too much damage on him. Smasher's arrogance and confidence was his downfall in some ways. V is fighting for his life and for everyone he loves. He has a clear purpose, and I think that works in his favor, since he must give everything of himself to defeat him and pass the gates of Arasaka. V's strength seems to be much lower than he is, but in the story we can see his potential at various points. He is capable of taking down many heavy Arasaka soldiers at the same time, and not only that, he has faced large gangs and characters with great skill, him emerging victorious from them. Not counting all the enemies with cyberpsychosis that he also defeated without much effort in Regina's questline, where he asks you to deliver them alive, but of course, you can kill them too. The fact is that he defeats them without much problem, and I'm talking about a few. These enemies in theory have many implants and advantages, which ended up driving them crazy, in addition to being completely controlled by anger and madness. I think this is also another point for V. In the final battle, the strategy factor is very important, where of course V would end up using it to his advantage, since in other areas, such as strength and speed, Smasher would have an advantage. However, on the battlefield, V evidently had to take advantage of it, complementing it with his abilities and implants to defeat Smasher. But let's not forget that V is dying, weaker than usual. Even so, can he beat him? As I told you before, even though the relic chip is weakening V, thanks to all of his abilities and implants, he can put up a great fight, tipping the balance in his favor, even with that disadvantage. Obviously, if V did not have the relic chip, and that problem was not a determining factor, V's strength and abilities would be even greater, which is very surprising, showing us how really powerful V ends up being at the end of the Cyberpunk story, being able to face a legend of Night City without any major problem, something that evidently at the beginning of the game he would not have been able to achieve. It is the path that he later travels, the implants and skills that he gains throughout his adventure, which gives him that extra bit to defeat Smasher, and obviously his willpower, which made him prevail on many occasions in the streets of Night City. V is not only very intelligent, handling both the hacking part, but he is also very physically strong. Although he may not seem like it, he can face great threats, as his story ended up showing us. And despite being dying and not being the most capable, he managed to make a very big name and reputation in Night City. There is no doubt about that. Therefore, I think it's not crazy that he beat Smasher if we consider all of the above. What do you think of all this? Even after everything, do you think V was lucky when it came to facing Smasher? Let me know in the comments. If you made it to this part of the video, I wanted to thank you and ask you to subscribe and leave a like to support me. For my part, that was all on this occasion. I'll see you in the next video.
How about that, Johnny? That was for you.
Rightly so. He did not deserve mercy.